because people are living now, instead of 8 hours a day, they're living perhaps 24 hours a day. So the demands are definitely higher. The second thing is money is tight. When money becomes tight, as you said, relationships, right? You have your honeymoon period in relation. When money becomes tight from the end user, automatically people who provide services get affected by it. So that's where we come in. And I always say our job is whenever I worked with my teams, we wear two hats. We're janitors and we're also asset managers, money managers, right? So we've got to do both. So I think now is this time for us even more, because most service providers, and that's Badr and people like him, will get squeezed. They will be taking most of the hit because they will still continue to provide the services, and salute to them. And of course, we will be even more demanding on what we want from them. So every time you see a staff not wearing a mask, we will make a very big noise about it. But we also got to understand, can you imagine a cleaner wearing a mask for 12 or 14 hours a day? It's exhausting. It's difficult. But we also need to be understanding on both sides, right? So I think there are a lot of practical things that we'll have to look at. Elevator buttons, people touching. Did you sanitize them every 1 hour? Things like that. It's going to be it's more operational. It's operational one, and it's financial as well. So I think what we need to do is we need to look at it very pragmatically in terms of how we can balance. I think that's the whole thing.
Great. Is everyone able to hear us? I just wanted to check because there are a few who have said that they're unable to hear. Gary, were you able to hear later? Or is there still an issue?
I never heard a word. I'm sure it was great, but I never heard a word of it.
Oh, no. Okay, there are a few who
I never heard anything Samir said. I heard you, but not Samir.
Okay, Samir, would you want to start off again? Gary, are you able to hear Samir now? Samir, would you want to say something?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Gary?
Nope.
Everybody else, I think, could.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't hear him.
Gary, do you want to log in again? Because the others are able to hear you, hear him. So if you could just log in again.
Yeah, no worries. Give me a second. Hold on.
Great. Sorry for that technical difficulty. We are just waiting for Gary. Well, Samir, thank you so much. I mean, of course, what you said was quite important, that there are two hats that a community manager has to don right now. And of course, a lot depends on the kind of synergy that the service provider also brings into this relationship. So I want to talk to you, Mr. Badr. How is the situation in Kuwait for service providers, and how does this entire equation work over there?
I think Kuwait is not different than the other areas within the GCC. The whole industry, or the whole country actually, is suffering from the corona and the issues related to it, and also because of the government instructions and orders to prevent the corona from spreading, have a great effect on some of the businesses. Of course, they are not all having the same effect, but some of them, they have a major where they have to shut down the whole operation, and some of them, they are almost now for 3 months in full close, and they don't know what to do with their customers, with their employees, and so on. If we come back to the property management and facilities management industry, I think there is a great challenge on there, because their customers or their end users, they are suffering. So they have to help them during that period. UFM is operating as a full integrated facilities management service provider, and also we provide the property management services. So basically, we are the end point for all the customers to communicate with, and we take it as our responsibility to help them during this period, whether it's the landlords, the owners of the properties, or the tenants, the end users. But definitely, many of our landlords, they have lost their revenues because the government have ordered to close some facilities, and those tenants, they are without an income for a long period of time, so they couldn't pay their rents. So we have to compromise in there and let pass that period, so then everybody can start again slowly and get back into the normal situation.
Great. Thank you so much. Gary, were you able to hear that? Is it better now?
Yeah, I got back about halfway through.
Okay, great. So I want to rope you into this discussion right now, and I know how strongly you feel about this subject. So I wanted to know your take as to what is the current status of the relationship, if I may say so, especially post the COVID-19. How have things changed, and in what way?
Well, I've spoke to a few people and seen a few things myself on sort of both sides, positive and negative. Obviously, the negative side is people stopped paying people. Whether they could or not seemed everybody seemed to ignore that fact, whether you had money or not, and just stop paying people. But on the positive side, there was a lot of sort of there was a lot of good communication. I think the relationship between service providers and the managers needs to be clear communication. And when this struck, it forced people to talk, forced people to communicate with each other. It forced them to plan, mobilise, tell them what they could do and what they couldn't do. We had to be honest with each other and direct with each other, because people's lives were at stake, or people's livelihoods were at stake. And that was a good thing. That was a positive. I think a lot of the service providers and a lot of the managers did adjust very quickly, and I think they should be commended for that, because not as far as I know, none of us have lived through a situation like this before. This wasn't a one-off event or an emergency case. This was a humanitarian global pandemic, and we had to change, and things were changing on the daily with government instructions. So communication got a lot better, and hopefully going forward that can stay in the relationship,
True.
But I think
I mean, that is key.
One of the things that, like you say, I'm passionate about it. It annoys me. It annoys me when people use this as a method of punishing people and not paying the supply chain. Listen, like Badr alluded to from the bit that I heard, people's businesses are closing. People are struggling. You need to keep the supply chain moving as much as possible, and if you can't, then you need to communicate with people to get that supply chain moving again. It's the lifeblood. You can't operate without them.
True. That's true. Okay, I think Mr. Tony is unable to figure out the sound. We'll just try to solve that. But let me get into the next question. Now, that is for both you and for you, Mr. Gary, as well as Mr. Samir. Now, we did have the new law that came about, early this year. Now, how has that impacted this relationship now? Mr. Samir, if you would want to start off.
I think firstly, the law is always definitely required. Good thing is always welcome something that brings in uniformity. The big challenge in the GCC especially is you have so many cultures coming in, and each culture brings in their own different or homegrown rules or regulations, whether it's out of the US or UK or Australia or even India or anywhere else. So I think when the first good thing is when a law comes out, now it's uniform. Everybody's got to follow. So that's step number one, right? The law of the land, so to speak. The advantage of this is it's good because it puts in order, and it gives, to some extent, it brings in, of course, RERA has now a bigger role to play as well with that, right? Regionally. And what that will overall help us is to make sure people are treated fairly. Subcontractors, everybody else is to some extent treated fairly. The only thing is the timing of it is very interesting, because the time at which it has come, there's no money. Let's face it, right? So now you've got to tap into reserves, which should be done, I think. But also, I think it is each homeowner's responsibility to make sure that the continuity. So as Mr. Badr said very well, right, is malls, all these things have shut down. The government has certain things down. But homeowners have still been enjoying their homes. They've been living in there. They've been collecting rent from people. So they need to make sure that they pay that forward in. They make their contribution. But after all, it's their asset. I think the law is a good step, but it's to be seen how it's going to be enforced. Yep.
Mr. Gary, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like Samer said, the law and uniformity is a good thing. Timing's maybe not been so great to hit us with extra compliance whilst we're trying to deal with a million other things. But such is life, I suppose. I mean, I think the main point behind the law was to be more transparent, to have more responsibility, more accountability, which is a good thing and should bring people into the market. But the sort of a main change that we've seen, or the main concern that we had, was releasing money out of the escrow accounts, particularly in Q1, Q2 2020, which is the main part of the law. That's the main change from the majority of the other operations. And the escrow was a struggle, and then we shut down government, which means we couldn't get to auditors, which means we couldn't get budgets approved for a while, and then eventually we managed to get provisional and all that done. But I think we need to go back and have a look at how the law and how the changes, albeit done with great intentions, actually affects operations. I mean, like we had to engage additional sanitizers, additional guards, thermometers, all this sort of stuff, deep cleaning. No budgeted line item, no money out of escrow. So how do you pay for it? So I mean, I think we just need to take these things as positively as we can and try and implement them across in the new law and learn our lessons, so we know operationally that we can still operate.
True. I mean, coming to you, Mr. Badar, I want to know from you, I mean, of course, it's been established that money has been one of the key challenges in this entire process. What are the other kind of challenges or the impact, like an operational impact, that service providers have faced, especially in times with their community manager?
Sure. First, just let me add little to the points that mentioned by my colleagues Gary and Samir regarding the money. The situation is vary from end user to end user, or from tenant to tenant. Some of those tenants, for example, the residential, some of them still they are paid by their employers, although that they are sitting at home and working from home. Some of them have lost their jobs, or they have a major cut on their salaries, some of them by 50%, some of them by different value. So we have to look into each situation differently, and we cannot apply just one rule to all, because some landlords, not within our properties, but outside, we heard about them, that they have given all their residential tenants 50% reduction on the rent, or 1 free month rent. But not all those tenants, they are suffering from less cash, because they are getting their salaries on time. So to keep the whole supply chain moving, those who they can afford to pay, they should pay. And that goes to the supplier and the service provider. If I can pay my subcontractors, I have to pay them, because also they have to pay their employees, even if not in full, at least on partial, so they can survive for this period. I think we have to spread the essence of positivity in here, where everybody should try to help within their capacity, and not try to harm the weak chain within the supply chain. Because once we go back to the normal, if those guys, they are not there to serve us as they used to be, I have to go and look for others. And because of this current situation, there might be no one to help me in providing my service and fill in that gap in there.
True, that's true. In fact, we have someone, Mr. Usman, who says that it all comes down to us as individuals. Everyone has to put in that additional effort within their bounds to be a property manager or a community manager, tenants, or even owners. I guess that kind of adds to that. But what are the other kind of challenges that we are seeing right now?
Sure. The great challenges in here for us here in Kuwait, because we are a service provider, and as you know, most of our services, it's rely on the manpower. And because the government have closed certain areas and restrict the movement during the partial lockdown and during the full lockdown, getting our employees and the workers to the sites and out of the site, that was challenge. Because although that we are not in full operation in all the sites, there are a minimum of activities have to be done regardless whether you are operating the facility or not. And to do that, you will need a minimum number of staff. So basically, getting the people, moving them around, that was a great challenge, especially that we have lost large number of our employees due to the lockdown of certain areas. Even during the partial lockout, certain areas in Kuwait have been locked down because that is where the majority of low-income workers, and they used to have a large spreading corona between them. So that area have been closed, and we couldn't get those people out of that area. So that was our great challenge, where I lost my tools, which I used to provide my services to my clients.
Okay. I mean, another one of the key challenges, I think something that even Gary pointed out was regarding training. So Gary, if you can just stress a bit more about that, like how would one imbibe training in this entire situation? Because a relationship like this is something based on understanding, isn't it? So how is this, I mean, how do we get training in?
I think one of the things that, and it's hard to say when everybody's worrying and panicking, is nobody actually knows what's going to happen. Nobody has a clue. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew what was good, bad, what was the spread was. So you can't actually train for it. You can't educate yourself for it, but you can keep your core skills. Keep calm, think, communicate, don't panic. Sort of basic sort of functions, and then you react accordingly. Like Badr said, we all had logistic issues, staff in and out of site, service providers moving in and out, and some of the guys done well with it. But the biggest thing was everybody was panicking. We've got no money. Well, I was hearing that 24 hours after lockdown started. Like, what do you mean you've got no money? You don't actually know what's going to happen next week yet, never mind next month. And a lot of decisions were getting made reactionary rather than actually thinking and planning it through. So I think if we just take it a step back, people need to understand that when they're operating in these buildings, like was rightly said earlier, not everybody lost their job, not everybody lost money, not everybody knows what's going on. But so we can't treat everything as one case. We need to go back to our fundamentals, which is we need to keep the building operating the way that it should be. We don't take anything new projects or anything on right now, and we reassess our relationships with service providers and our relationships with our clients, and we see what needs to be done, because from one building to the next it could be completely different. And I think if we spend our time taking some time to train our staff to think like that rather than thinking in black and white, then maybe we can just get through this, get through it to the next bit.
True. We have an interesting question from Mr. Mubashir. He says that as of now, the new law is in place. So why not use it to go after the defaulters who have not paid for years? Now, of course, the court will assess the individual situation before enforcing it.
I have a very interesting one to finish that one off. So on one side, we have this. So I was in Dubai when this was just enacted, and then I moved to Saudi Arabia. The biggest challenge of this law, soon after this came out, an announcement from RERA was made that we cannot charge it. So you will see collections rate, and Gary, I'm sure, and many others like him who are in the business, their collection rates will be below 50% right now. Because everybody in the market knows they've got free money. The homeowners know they don't have to pay. There's no pen that 1% per month is gone. So there is no, slap on the wrist for making a delayed payment. So they're like, what, we'll pay at the end of the year. Good luck, come after me. And not only that, the second thing is going after somebody legally is expensive and time consuming. So in my last assignment, we took almost about 1,200 people to court, or we served them legal letters. Some people said, okay, fine, they would pay. Guess what? Many people said, take me to court. We'll see what happens. Right? So they know it takes time. And then when in the end, when it comes for settlement, you probably, the judge might say, you know what, just pay the amount and move on. So it's challenging for sure. And I don't know what Gary and Gary's taking local, but yeah, it's going to be very challenging.
We to answer Mubashir's question, there isn't actually a process under the new law. There's a worded process. It's not functional. It's I don't know if it's miles away. From what I understand, and it's not ready yet. It's in name only. It's a problem. Listen, like Sam said, legal takes forever. We've got no ability to cut access to services. We've got no ability to penalise people not to pay. So that's a problem. You're automatically going to get people that don't want to pay not paying if you don't have a stick. The only way that during my career here that I've managed to get people to pay, it takes a lot of time and effort to speak to them, and you need to try and, it's a relationship. This whole industry, this whole market is relationship. You need to find out why they're not paying and try and address that. It could be the silliest of reasons. They could have not liked your manager, how he answered the phone to them 3 years ago, and they just need somebody to phone them up and speak to them about that. You need to really try and determine that you'll probably get, in good times, 60-70% of your people just paying because that's the way it is. And then you've got another 10-15% that will pay if you give them a cuddle. And then you've got another 10-15% that you need to attack in courts and things like that. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There is no legal framework here to do this. It's not there yet. It's miles away. The only place in Dubai that's got it is the IFC, and it works like a charm. But in mainland Dubai, it's just not there. It's not there yet. Even with the new law, it's not there yet.
Actually, there's something that Tony's writing here, and I totally, in terms of, I think, just adding on to what, there are two sides to it. One is the money coming in from homeowners, and the second is we take that money and we pay to people like, a service provider like Tony and many other companies like him. I think if we don't pay them, they should also, like in the rest of the world, if on an aged payment more than 90 days if it's due, service providers should be charging the association a penalty in terms of not paying. So it could be 1%. It should be reversed as well. So it put pressure on both sides, right? For an unpaid bill, it's accumulating.
It's a horrific, right? It's a horrific culture here of not paying people. Holding people's money is a horrific culture here.
It's unfair. It's really unfair to people who I accept.
And it's done because
Mr. Bala,
people don't know how to manage contracts.
Yeah,
basically.
I guess we'll come back to that. There are a lot of comments that are coming on it, but I want to know from Mr. Badr. I mean, of course, there's no law number 6 over there in Kuwait, but what are the kind of initiatives that the service providers and the property managers have taken out there to handle situations as this?
I think in Kuwait, we didn't have the same situation where there in Dubai that people have defaulted for long period of time. Putting things with the law here in Kuwait and paying the rent is taken seriously by everybody. So the situation is a little bit better than Dubai. So basically, those who they have defaulted, there are an illegal action takings against them, and then they should pay whatever is due on them, and then the landlord take the property and he rent it back, and things moving. So basically, if they have a good property manager who is chasing the monthly payment, usually they are in good shape. You might have a few months, 1 month or 2 months delay, but usually not more than that. So basically, the steady income is coming to the property managers, and for that, they are able to pay their service provider. But because of this situation, many of them, they have lost big chunk of their revenue, and they are unable to pay their service providers. Or still, maybe some of the payment is not due yet because of the payment terms, but they might have difficulties in paying it on time. So, but to go out of that, the service provider, like a UFM, because we are both the property manager and the facility manager, and we are the single point of contact with our landlord. We take that as our responsibility. So basically, whatever we can reduce in cost, even from items that not a standard required for this period, we have to cut it down. So basically, the clients, they don't have to pay the same amount, and we help them through that process. However, we are trying not to harm our subcontractors and the down chain suppliers, because also we want them to survive. But surviving is not meaning making a profit now, because I don't think anyone will going to be profitable this year. However, we are trying to minimize the losses and to pass this period where everybody then can start again.
True. I think that's a very key point that you said, that survival is now what we need to look at. I mean, Mr. Samir, you have something to say to this? Do you want to add anything?
I think survival should have been, any business should always work on survival. And I think this is something we quickly forget. When I say survival mode is, and I think Gary touched on it, is we go in for all these fancy kind of improvements that may not really yield any result. So, and I've seen this a lot in the region. People will you should put in money which will either improve asset value as a whole point, or it will improve efficiency, or it will give you better return cost. That was never really done, because I hate to say this, but I don't think many managers have that experience, unfortunately. And I think the market is mature. That's great. But any business, even an owners association or a building, is a business, right? And it ought to conserve cash as much as it can in the good days and bad days. So I think that's the first point. So the ones that were always doing this will survive well, will not have any problem. The ones who were just depending on, what comes in, we deficit, we'll pass it on the next year, those kind of companies, they're going to take a huge hit for sure. And what you're going to see is the service providers, a lot of companies that provide service, not utilities, because that's services. You will start seeing they will put pressure on the property manager, will start putting pressure on, reduce your cost by 20%. But guess what? They will not agree to reduce their SLAs and KPIs by 20%, the performance metric. That also has to be adjusted. So if you were cleaning a building 4 times a year, you got to be okay to clean it 3 times a year or 2 times. You got to be okay. You got to take the hit on both sides. It can't be only one side. The other one is, I always believe, and I'm sure Tony's here, and most of our contracts here are very input-based. They're not output-based. We say they are, but actually they're hybrid. But now, what I mean by that is, we will specify we need 20 cleaners every day in the building. It should not be that. It should be, we just need the building clean. Whether you get 2 people or you get 4 people, I leave that to you. You figure it out. Because why? That gives you room to adjust, as Badr is saying, for good times and bad times. So maybe you will speak to your staff and say, guys, can we work overtime to catch up for lost manpower? Or can we bring in specialized equipment to improve it? So these kind of measures, we need to be flexible. And when I say we, is us as property managers. Right? I really do feel for my colleague and Badr and many people like him, Tony, and a lot of people I know in the business. They are the guys who get hammered. They're wedged in the corner. Really unfortunate.
I kind of feel like a counselor over here, because we've kind of opened the Pandora's box out here, Mr. Tony, in fact, says that it's the knock-on effect of non-payment to service providers is horrific. Now, there's so many variables and factors involved. The service provider is the rung at the top of the ladder, and don't pay the service provider, then the entire market suffers. So this must be realized and taken extremely seriously. I guess that's quite rightly put, and hopefully, people do realize that there is a trickle effect of what is happening out here. Well, heading back to the discussion, now I want to talk to you, Mr. Samir, what are the kind of initiatives that you feel would help, to work to, maintain this kind of a relationship, a synergy between both these parties?
I think the first thing is, and I think Gary said, is there is very poor contract management. I'll tell you how most contracts are made. A friend has it on a pen drive, and I gave this talk about a year ago. He passes it on to his next friend. The next friend passes it on the next friend, and they all copy paste a contract, and they have no understanding of what's in there. That's not now how a contract is made, right? So the first thing is the contract needs to be, you need to understand. And a contract, when I say that, because it'll also specify that the payment term, right? In 60 days, if an invoice is submitted, it's got to be paid. That's one, for example. The second thing is, in terms of when you're talking about manpower, most contracts in the business, and time has come to change. As I said, they are very input based. You need to provide 20 laborers or 20 guys, and you have to run the building. It needs to be more output based, right? So that's the thing. So right now they're kind of hybrid. It's between and so everybody is in this hybrid, which needs to move. The other one I think is, as I think Gary said, is very important, communication. And I think a lot of people here are writing on it as well. Communication is absolutely important. And when I say communication, it doesn't mean that, you only communicate the bad stuff. It's also the good stuff. So isn't it wonderful that a lot of things that, the service providers in buildings do on a day-to-day basis, property manager should communicate that to all the 200 residents in that building and give them that comfort that this is what these guys are doing every day, right? So that's one. Second one is also, I would think, is bringing down on a table both sides, or it's a tripartite agreement, so to speak. The homeowner, the property manager, and then the FM company. Each one has a different viewpoint on what they have to do. You've got to hear the viewpoint of each and to come to some kind of agreement, right? So if I may say, so there's a big disconnect. The homeowner wants a 5-star service, but guess what? He's not even ready to pay for a 2-star service, right? He doesn't want to pay. How can he get that service? So everybody needs to sit down on the table and agree on that. I think that is communication.
We have a question from Mr. Osama here. He is asking us that what is the best process for this critical time for all the properties, especially retail business? So would anyone want to take up that question? In the MENA area.
From management or for FM?
I'm guessing it is from FM side. Mr. Osama, if you could let us know. I mean, Mr. Badr, would you want to take it up from the FM side, and then maybe we can...
Could you please repeat that question again?
That what is the best process for this critical time for all the properties, especially the retail business in the MENA areas?
Yeah. Again, when we go to the retail business, they are not all within the same situation, so they vary. So the landlord or the property managers, they have to look into those cases one by one. And also they have to put in their consideration not to go hard on those who they have lost their revenues during this period, because if you lose any tenants within this period, it will be very difficult to get anyone back within a reasonable period of time. Still, I don't think anyone is renting now, and no one will going to rent within the coming maybe 5-6 months till the whole market recover again and the businesses start booming. So we have to help our tenants and look into each case individually. Some of the people, they are, although that they have their I would say their outlets closed, still they are in partial business, either through a delivery or delivery from the stores or things like that, or on the WhatsApp or online business. Some of them, they are completely closed down, like the restaurants, which they are within the malls. So if they don't have any branches for drive through or for the takeaway, they will be in completely loss of business. So they have to have a different treatment than those who they are in partial operation or in full operation. However, my actually advice is to the users of those businesses. For example, the coffee shops, they are closed here in Kuwait for the past maybe 3 months. And some of the people, they are used to go to certain places and they enjoy that environment. I think it is the time now they should, if they can, they should help those business owners to survive during this period. So when the things goes back, they are there to open their places and they can re-enjoy that environment again. And one of the ways that the small businesses and medium businesses have put it, that they start selling coupons and future tickets. So basically, although we are closed now, that guy, he used to go maybe 4 or 5 times a month to that place, and he used to spend 20, 30 dinar, for example. Okay, now he have that money because he is still employed and his employer is paying him, and his expenses may be less now because he doesn't go outside and he cannot spend. So there is no harm if he can buy those tickets for the future and pay those business owners which he prefers for them to survive. And when the things goes back to the normal, they will going to reopen and he can get the service against that ticket, whatever he got. So business owners also, they have to start thinking of a way where they communicate with their loyal customers and their fans, because I'm sure they will going to help them. But if that communication is not there, they don't know how they will going to help. And that poor business owner, he might close down and just evacuate the place even before the whole situation goes back to normal. And then he is not there in business, and his customers, they cannot enjoy whatever they used to enjoy. So those sort of initiatives have to start from the business owners, actually, with some help maybe from the industrial committee to give it some thoughts and ideas.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Badr. Mr. Osama, I hope that answers your question. And just to get back into our agenda of discussion, Mr. Gary, now I want to pose this question to you. I mean, according to you, how can one rebuild and sustain this relationship, especially during these turbulent times?
Communicate. You need to speak to each other. You need to be honest to each other. You need to communicate if you've got changes or challenges within the problems regarding cash flow or scope. Having a master-slave relationship between a client and a service provider does not work. It will never work. It's not sustainable. It'll work for a short period of time, then you'll move on to somebody else, then you'll run out of service providers to do that to. The only way to do this is to talk to each other, see where the challenges are at, see where people, and this is general advice, not even in a pandemic, but having a look at what services you actually need, what you can pay for, what you can't pay for, what is critical to the asset, what's critical to the end user. I mean, you touched upon it earlier. I mean, a relationship's it's a partnership. It's like being married. It is what it is. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. But if we decided we were going to leave our wives every time we had an argument, it would be a hell of an expensive process. And it's the same with a service provider. You need to keep working on that relationship. It will get paid back 10 times over. It doesn't mean that it's great all the time. But if you keep these lines of communication open, you make sure contractually you're covered, you're reviewing it. And listen, sometimes the clients don't have a clue either, so they shouldn't actually be the master of this relationship. So this is why you need to work together. You need to use your skills. This is why you're paying people to do this job. And ultimately, you need to trust them. And I think somebody put that in the comments, that I think it was Eunice, that you need to trust in the service providers. Absolutely you do. Because otherwise, all you're going to do is you're going to put layers and layers and layers of supervision on top of it. You have management companies with 2-3 layers of supervision, then the FM company with 2-3 layers of supervision, and then the owners are trying to pay for it. It's not going to work. Not when every penny or every dirham or every fill is going to be looked at and intensely reviewed by everybody going forward. It's just not going to work. And I think another thing, this is something Samir brought up, and I wanted to jump in then, but I decided to be polite for once in my life. But we he said that it's a 3-way agreement, and he's absolutely right. Has anybody ever actually asked the owners properly what they want? Like, see, like I've done this for 10 years here, and we've asked boards and we've asked committees, but they're 5 people out of 400, 500 units. Have we ever actually asked people what they want and what they're prepared to pay for? Or are we all just sitting here telling them what they have to pay for? Because I found when you actually sit down with people and you show them this and say, you want that? That's roughly what it's going to be. You want that? It's going to be that. People start to understand and realise. But it's this going back to the same thing I'll preach constantly. Communicate to every single stakeholder what's going on, what do you want, and it will remove a lot of time and energy that you spend arguing with people or explaining yourself to people as if you actually involve them in the first place. And I think that's how we sustain these relationships, not just with service providers, not just with the managers, but with your end users, because there's a good chance out of 500 units in a building, you're going to have 500 different cases of things that they can afford, they can't afford, or whatever. So you need to find common ground. That's what community management is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to take sides here, but I would assume that a pandemic as this that we are facing right now would make someone a little more sensitive and understanding towards what the other person is going through. So don't you think that now things may change, or people are realizing the value of the other person's service? I'm just asking.
I hope so.
I mean, you know the reality of it.
I think if we all bring a little bit more humanity into what we're actually doing, then it might be beneficial to everybody. I think we forget sometimes in the industry, because we're so clogged into it, that this is people's homes. It's where they bring their kids up. It's where they play. It's where they have their offices and they have things, and they're going to have emotions up and down as well. And they don't sit and spend all day talking about reserve funds and capex and OPEX. It's just not a thing. It's just their home. And we need to understand that, and that needs to relate back into our relationships with service providers. It needs to be all one together, because if we all work together and it works, you'll spend way less money trying to fix things. You'll spend way less energy arguing with people, and you'll be able to move on and do some more positive things in your life. That's my sort of mantra behind it.
My take is, you wanted to add something? Sorry.
Yeah, actually, I fully agree with Gary on the point that the communication is an essential part of the relation between the service provider and their employers or the building owners. But also to add to that, we need to have the positive attitude and also the understanding of the purpose of negotiation. Many people, they think that you go to negotiate to get the maximum benefit to your side. That is not a negotiation, because the service providers, in many cases, they are desperate for the job. He might accept any terms, but then look into the part of the level of the service and the quality of the service. He cannot deliver it at that value, but he cannot afford to lose it. So basically, those who they are very harsh on their negotiation and they think they are the winners by getting the lowest price or lower than the market price, they are actually losers, because they will end up with a service provider. They don't provide a service, or at least not the minimum quality as per the market standard. So going back to understanding the purpose of the negotiation, to have a win-win situation. We know the cost of certain services in the market. There is no point that the service provider will going to give me that service at lower than the market rate, because he's not going to pay from his own pocket, because he doesn't have that money, okay? And he's not a charity. So we have to give him at least that minimum and the little profit that is required for him to continue his business. Because again, if my service providers only, they are just covering their cost for 5 or 6 years, do you think they will going to continue doing a business that doesn't provide them with any profit? That will not going to happen. But he will accept taking maybe 1, 2, 3, 10 jobs with zero profit, and sometimes with a little losses, thinking that the situation will get improved. However, the landlord or the owners, they think if they can get it this time, the next contract will be at a lower rate, and the one after that, he will going to push the contractors to reduce it. So he thinks he's getting more in there. However, he's getting less, and he is damaging his property. And the tenants, they will not be satisfied, and that will going to reflect back on the property as a general. So looking into that, everybody should help the industry to grow and not to get the weak chain within the supply chain out of the equation, because then we will not going to have anyone to help us in providing the services. We have to help the weak one to improve, to provide a better service, because then we can rely on them to provide a better service to our clients.
True. Mr. Samir, you had
just on that, Badr. Sorry, Meg, just one point on that. Sorry, Sama. You're perfectly right? But all of us here that are either listening or involved have got a responsibility to call these clients out who are not acting like that, not acting to build sustainable relationships. We need to stop working with these guys. We can't encourage it. We need to stop it. And that responsibility is with us as service providers. And yeah, it might mean you're turning down work and you're turning down jobs, but it's not sustainable. It's not a relationship you want like that. And I think we've all got that responsibility. Everybody that's listening and everybody that's talking on this have got a responsibility to call these clients out and not deal with them. It's unacceptable behaviour.
True. Mr. Samir, you had something to say as well.
I just wanted to add two parts. So one, from my experience of almost 17 years in the business here, and typically what would always happen is the FM company that operates in any of these buildings or communities bankrolls for as much as 6 days. Aging report goes back to 6 months. 180 days they're bankrolling because of the lack of professionalism on our part to make sure that the money is there to pay. So they're the ones who always take the hit. It's never Diva, it's never Empower, it's always the FM company. You know, they always, if you go through the aging report, it always goes back to 180 days. And poor guy, they always do their hits, right? And as Gary said rightly, they're always the slave and the master relation. They're the slave, right? They have no right to ask for their money. You want, we'll pay it to you. That's one part. The second part of it, I think, is, again, everything that we're talking about actually really, really comes down to money. That's it. You can say what you want, it all is about money. And I think in money, the money comes down from all the way up from the owner of the property. It comes down to the property manager, and then he has to juggle that. So first part is in terms of, firstly, from my experience, I've had people walk into my office with Rolexes and they say, we cannot pay 12,000 dirhams. I'm like, you know what, your watch is like 4 times the price. You have these people. It is sad. And until a law is enforced, you were touching on this thing of humanity and, human being becoming better people. Trust me, when it comes to money, nobody really is. It's a fact. There are a very few people who are genuinely will, volunteer and go and make sure that happens. Most people, guess what? They will take advantage of this. They will still go and buy a second Rolex, but they will not pay that cost because there's no penalty on it. So I think that cause and effect has to be there. Otherwise, it's just not. So I own property in Canada. So for my properties in Canada, if I don't pay my dues, the next month they can actually, like as we were talking about, they can put a lien on my property. They'll give me a warning. The next month they will put a lien. After that, it goes to court. They dispose the property, finished. I make sure the money is always there. So it's got to be done that way. That's what I'm really trying to say.
True. Of course, we do have about 15 minutes left, so do use this time to ask in your questions. In the meantime, Mr. Badr, I want to talk to you about, what are some of the lessons that, one has learned from this unexpected situation?
Yeah. One of them is the type of the contract, and I think Gary have mentioned that, and also Samir have talked about it related to those contracts where they are dictating the number of heads or the manpower. I think those type of contracts, they are the one which suffer more during this period. And those contracts which they are based on an SLAs, they have done better for both ends, for the service provider and also for the owners or the requester of those services. And I think we have to start moving the whole industry into a service-based agreement and not to rely on the easy way of providing the headcounts, because that is not helping anyone. But the clients or the owners, they are not the expert. And some of them, they might own only just one property or two properties, and managing their properties is not their prime business. They have other businesses. So that might be a side business which is expected to get them an additional revenue, and they are expecting it to be a steady stream of revenue. However, they have the worst type of contracts with their service providers, whether it's the main ones or the subs. So moving the whole industry or moving the whole business into a service base and helping the client to understand that, because going again back to the client and saying, let us have our next contract a service base, he will going to panic because he doesn't understand it. And people, they don't like the things which they don't understand and they are not familiar with. So I think it's part of our responsibility to introduce that gradually and get the clients and the landlords the chance to benefit from that. And that is what the facilities management industry is trying to promote, especially within the region, through the effort of MIFMA, Middle East Facilities Management Association, which is based in Dubai. And UFM is part, or they are founding member of that association. And we are trying to move the whole industry into a service level agreement and to go out from the traditional ones. Another point is the things which many organizations or many service providers, they don't do, which is the risk management and contingency planning. I'm not claiming that we are the best on that, but because we have that within our DNA of our organization, I think that's helped us in getting through this period. I don't want to say easy, but it was manageable, because always risk management and risk evaluation, it's part of our day-to-day activities, and putting the chances that things will go wrong. And what we could do, at least from the planning part, it was there. So when we had the situation, we had to pull all those thoughts back and put them in practice. Maybe if we would know that these things would be happening, we would be more prepared to something similar to this situation. We used to plan for disasters within the building or cut off services and how we can handle those within those facilities. However, now the situation is a little bit more difficult, and because always also we try to distribute, and we don't put all our baskets in one, all our eggs in one basket. So going back to the challenge which we faced, that is the labors. Many of our competitors or the service providers within the country, usually they go to the areas where they can get the cheapest rent or the lowest rent for their labor camps, and usually they put them all together because that will going to help them on the transportation. However, when those areas get closed, they lost all their manpower. For UFM, because it's part of our activities that always we distribute. So actually our staff, we have around 4,000 employees and workers, and we are the one who's responsible for their accommodation. The accommodation is scattered and distributed around Kuwait, and that helps when we have lost certain areas. At least some other areas still they are functioning, and we don't lose the whole thing. So all that have to be put back now into all those people which they are suffering. It's not only just to survive, but also to look into the future if something similar happen. Are you ready to deal with it? And what you can do during the good time to help you to go through the difficult times. I think going back into the risk management and contingency planning is something essential for each and every business, and we should not underestimate the value of that.
True. Thank you so much. I mean, those are some very key lessons out there. And before we end the session, I mean, I want to pose this question to you, Gary, as well as Samir. Is there a new approach now towards this entire relationship that we're talking about for the last 1 hour? Like, is there any kind of a new approach that one can take to this?
I have a very interesting one. And I think this whole thing is going to teach businesses globally, whether it is moving processes out of China or reconfiguring people working in offices to cut costs, at home to cut costs. You remember I said we are 3 people in the relationship and we are the middleman. I see there will be a lot of pressure on the middleman, which is us, property manager. I think they will start fading out. They will start getting replaced by software. And the FM will start taking more active role in what the property manager does and the homeowner. So we are the middleman, which will start getting kind of split, or I wouldn't say they will totally vanish, but they will become very skeleton. So earlier it would be a big army. It will now probably become 2 people, for example. And you will get replaced. Homeowners will take an active part in terms of committees. The service providers will also step up their game, and brace yourselves for the committee management. I see that.
You're all about bursting the bubble. Well, Mr. Gary, what about you? I mean, what do you have to say? Like, what would be the new approach now?
No, I agree with Samer. I think everybody needs to take a step back, have a look at what's actually essential in what you're doing. Essential in your operations, essential in your company, essential in your departments, your divisions, and focus on how to deliver that service so that if this happens again, or when this happens again, we don't all need to sit in the house and lose 50% of our salary. And the only way to do that, he's right, you've got software, you're cutting out certain people, but there's always going to be a requirement for people that know what they're doing and can sort of make things work. But instead of having maybe 5-6 staff, you're going to have 1 or 2. And I think it's about time, if somebody's listening to this and they've got their career, you're going to need to try and work out how to make yourself essential. That's the terms nowadays, isn't it? Essential and non-essential. So how do you make yourself essential in your organisation or your community or company or whatever, and take it from there. But it's all about maintaining relationships, it's all about communicating, and it's all about cutting out the fat of stuff you don't need. Because I guarantee you, when everybody went to work from home, we realised that we didn't need 90% of the stuff that we use, or we do. And it's something Samer said right at the start, you need to think about your business as to survive from the start. And the first thing you will do, and the first thing everybody's done, is when they went home to their family, when all of this started, was, what do we need to survive? And we cut out all the trips to the mall, we cut out all the ridiculous expenses that we all pay for, and we focused on what the core service of what we're meant to do is. And that's what the future is going to be for a long time, because there's not going to be spare money to do nice to haves.
So I guess survival is the name of the game now.
Yeah.
So I guess on that note, I think we can end this really insightful and engaging conversation. And we hope that, this will help us really wake up to the alarming factors that are potentially can harm this relationship, and also use this time in order to rectify it. I mean, like all of you said to us that communication, that is the key right now. And we certainly hope that this distance doesn't really stop the communication, but rather increase it. So thank you again for all of you, for your time, for your knowledge, for your inputs, and also thank you to the audience for your comments. Of course, it's all about all of us talking, and we certainly hope these dialogues are kind of ensuring that we start bringing in these better practices into the industry and hopefully raise the standards as well. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our key sponsor, that's Farnic, and as well as all of you out here who are here supporting us through this entire journey. So we will be back again next week with another interesting session. So do stay tuned. And until then, please do stay safe and a happy weekend.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.